Hello, everyone. I've been guided by Thoth to uh, create a developing procedure to work with the TZO field. Now, when I say new, it's expanding. In other words, you can work with the one you've already been working with. You can change and work with this one. You can work with the other one day and this one the next. It's just another path, another opening. But I am hoping that many of you will feel guided to include it, or however you want to do it, with your TZO process. Now, I'm assuming because where I've embedded this video, I will embed this video, that I will also have links to the main TZO gateway page of the TZO field, and a link to my article in the City of Seraphim, which has also a connecting article to that, a link on the bottom of that page to take you to part 2. Because it's really necessary that you you understand these topics before you listen to this video, because I'm not going to go back and explain those things. But before we start with understanding the process and all of that, I need to share with you some of what I received the other day that came just before I was given the process, where I was guided to really go into a remote viewing into the City of Seraphim. Now, I've touched into it before, but not to the degree I did the other night. And I saw it through new eyes. I saw things I had not seen before, and it didn't change what I wrote in the article. It's just expanded it to understand how all of this fits together. And I'm not going to go into great detail here because we want to get on to the process, but I do need to touch on some points. Now, the image you're seeing here on the screen is a collage I created, and the figure in it, of course, is my avatar, and one of my avatars representing Thoth Hara as he appears to me in his inner earth and also new earth form. I say both because although he dwells in a physical body, physical that's a little higher frequency than what we know as physical, but nevertheless physical, not in Seraphim, but in a very close area in the Blue Mountains. It's a compound where he and other Merkaba of the host dwell, but he frequents Seraphim. So that's his form as I see him. It's not exactly, correct. I mean, my gosh, I'm using a Second Life avatar, but I have created it. I've put pieces together and modified the shape and done all kinds of things to make him look like what I feel is very close. You could pick him up in a lineup to the being that I feel is him. And the image behind, of course, came off of the web somewhere, but it looks very much like what I see as the Golden Temple. It's central, it's key to what we're going to be working with here, because we start out with one thing, but we're eventually going to be including the Golden Temple. The lamp is representing a lamp of his, and I'm not going to go into that. I put that in the picture for another article that I did, but I wanted you to see this picture again to understand the importance of the Golden Palace, and of course, a palace temple. I want to call it a palace. I keep switching back and forth in those terms, but since it's a very sacred place, I'm settling on temple. And to see Thoth, as I believe he really almost very closely resembles the being that I see or know. So, because he's the one that's really the higher director of the work, all the work that I do. And most specifically right now, we're speaking about the TZO field. He's certainly orchestrating that. So when I had this experience, this remote viewing the other night, just prior to being given this new process, I was astonished to see the Golden Temple sitting between two slopes of a mountain. In other words, there's two mountains, or points of a mountain, maybe you could call it that. And in between, where there's space that drops down to the floor, then way down below, the temple is just sitting there. I thought it was sitting in space. I thought it was floating. And then I realized it was not, that it was on some kind of, I call it plexiglass. Obviously, it's not plexiglass. In fact, folks inform me it's made of crystal, but it looks invisible, and yet I was able to see, or I was able to be shown that it wasn't. Excuse me. And so this temple is sitting in this, suspended in this space. But it's not alone. It has gardens and, you know, flora and plants, and there are these paths on all sides that lead outward, and the ones that connect to the mountain on either side. Now, I thought they were paths, but later I began to realize it was a labyrinth, and not just an ordinary labyrinth where we go, you know, into a spiral to go to the center. They're sort of spirals within spirals. They're not exactly full spirals, but they're geometric paths. And I believe there's something like 5 of them. And each one is named. Like, I knew one was named the Lion Path. I never got to the other names. Maybe doing that before we're through here. And people walk these paths, which are actually labyrinths because they're affecting the brain, you know, the mind-brain continuum, as a ordinary labyrinth would, but this is far more developed. So they are allowing the person, they choose different ones. It's kind of like a brain, and you know, the brain has these spirals in it, not spirals, but, you know, paths in the brain, you know, how it loops and goes back and forth and all of these, and there's 2 halves to it, right? Well, you have the 2 halves of the mountain, or 2 mountains, or whatever it is, and then you have these pathways, like a circuitry in the center of the 2 halves of the brain. And in the center of the circuitry sits the golden temple. Now, if you can visualize, if you will, because I certainly couldn't create this in an artwork, it's just beyond me. So you have this, it looks like an invisibility, like they're kind of, it's like this ground, this pathway, and this land is kind of floating in space, and it's ragged around the edges. It doesn't go all the way to the end, so it looks like an island. It looks like a floating island, but it's not really a floating island. It's being held up by this incredible crystalline sheet. How that was created, I have no idea, because it's enormous, you know, and it goes between all of this. Now, to make it more interesting, where the paths are not, where the land is not, because it seems like it grows out of the crystal, like it's some kind of an organic matrix that you can grow this stuff. So you have the plants and the trees growing out of this plexiglass, this plexi crystal. And but around all of that is water. It's not extremely deep, but it's like flowing, gently flowing water. And as it flows and it gets closer to the edge of all of this, it flows off in these waterfalls. Now or a vast waterfall, one big one, I guess, but with different trails. So underneath all of this is a whole nother land area that's down on the bottom of the land, you know, and I haven't even explored that yet, but it's inhabited as well. None of this is excessively inhabited, but it has people, and there's houses and things. I'm not sure what's going on down there. It's more shamanic down there. And there's a light fog that comes up under the water, and it creates these light clouds. So there's light under there. It's not dark, but it's a diffused light. I could go on and on because this thing is just amazing, but I'm not going to do that on this. But I want you to get an idea of how the golden temple is positioned. And it has this circuitry this labyrinth circuitry around it. It's many labyrinths in one. Let's say 5 labyrinths in one. But you have both sides of it. So there might be 10 labyrinths because, yes, there would be 10 because 5 is on one side and 5 is on the other. They have a meeting point, but the meeting point is the temple in the center. So you really have each half having 5 parts. Now there are dwellings that have been on tiers going up the side of the mountain. Think Machu Picchu or something, if you could take 2 Machu Picchus and put them somewhat close together, and then you put this plexiglass in between them with the temple on the top, and then you have, on the tiers, you have their larger tiers, and you have housing or buildings, very beautiful, like adobe-like, and I'm saying adobe-like because I don't really know what they're made of, very earthen, and they're very light colored, kind of like in Greece or something, and they go up the sides, and people live in those. I know because that part I had seen. I had been having flashes of this for years because I believe that, I have a body inside. I have an incarnation in Seraphim, not as some high master being or anything, but I do have an incarnation in Seraphim, a female one. And I was aware of this, not knowing the name of the city or anything like that, but as long ago as when I was like 23 or 24, 25 maybe. And I was aware of her name, although I mispronounced it at the time. And now I've been given the proper pronunciation. So this is not something I just happened overnight. I've been aware of this, but I've never really gone into it. I've never really tried to connect to her deeply until a series of events happened where I discovered the letters that George L. Lawrence, the scientist, sent to my mother and I, and it opened that whole door with the planetary, the symbol for the planetary genius and all of that. And when that started coming back to me, because he had those trips into the inner earth, although he didn't know that's what they were, but it was proven to me that it was because we both washed our hands in green liquid, and he couldn't have known that I did that. I mean, that's such an odd thing. So I know that that was what was happening for him. So when that started coming back into my space, I started reconnecting to, well, I called her in the old days Michaela, but it was really Mikala. And I started reconnecting to her, which is me in another form, just like Kira is me in a starship experience. And this is not something that, oh my gosh, Maya's so special because she has these different lives. No, we're all everywhere. We have so many lives that are concurrent with this. And if you consider that really time is not of the essence, even our what we call past lives and future lives are concurrent. But we're looking more in the understanding of what works with this timeline and what we're working with here, that we have other lives that are going on. So it's not just me or some elite group of souls. But I'm talking about me right now because I have to explain how this took place for me. So let me see where I was in all of this. It's a lot. I'm trying to boil it down to something that doesn't take too long to talk about here. So I'm going to take a sip of tea. So we have the palace, the temple palace. It's sitting in the center of the sheet of crystal that's clear crystal. And then we have growing out of this crystal, some special kind of crystal, obviously, trees and plants, and it's all manicured. It's not a wilderness, it's manicured land. But the pathways the labyrinth pathways on either side are not set in a field or anything. They're the pathways, there's some foliage on the side a little bit, I think, but mostly it's just there. And you could literally, there's a wall you're walking inside of, but it's not a really high wall. And you can look over it. And if you looked over it, you would see down into the water, a few little plants on the sides and into the water. And of course, there is some sandy stuff in there. It's like white sand kind of swishes around down in there. But there's no mud and dirt and microbes and stuff like you'd see, ordinarily. I don't know how this works to keep that from happening, but this is what I see. So as you're walking down your labyrinth path, you can look over the sides and see this. Now the walls are made of this beautiful sort of different colors of blue and whatever crystal. And it seems to be intelligent. I don't know, intelligence is a big word. It seems to be responsive to your thought, to your feelings. And it seems to kind of light up a little bit, not dramatically, but you can feel that you feel it as you walk through it, because it's sending and receiving. Now, what does this have to do with the TZO electric field? This is what it has to do with it, as much as I know now. Oh, there's always more. The person, as people walk down this path to the Golden Temple, the people that are doing this, they're not saying, oh, let's go let's just go see the Golden Temple. I feel like spending some time at the Golden Temple today. That's not the way it's working. The only people that are going into those grounds in that temple are people who basically are assigned to do so. That's their job, to walk the labyrinth. And then when they get there, certain ones go into the temple. Some just stay in the gardens and then return, walking back through the path. I wasn't allowed to remote view inside the temple yet. So I started to do it, and they said, no, not yet. You're not ready yet. So that means apparently I will be able to. Eventually, we're going to be doing processes within the Golden Temple in some way or form. I have to kind of be the one that opens that door first, and then we can all do that. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't see it in your own way, any way you choose. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in regard to this particular process and what I'm working with here. So these persons have a job, and their job is to walk this path, not day and night. They have shifts, certain people are walking, but there's always somebody walking. It's kind of like perpetual choir. In a way it is, because they're toning while they're doing it. So I don't know when they get to the garden, maybe they don't keep toning, but when they're walking the path, they're all toning, and they're toning specifically. And the connection to the TZO electric field, that's what they're working with. They're working with before the TZO electric was created, because this is a created interface, okay? They were working with the whole grid of the planet. But now they have the TZO that they can feed this energy into that connects directly to human beings in their dream time and their higher spiritual state more directly than it did before. It was connecting before, but this is a more direct connection. And those of us who know about this in the terminology that I'm giving here, and maybe some people that don't know about it in the terminology, but they're still working with it in a very direct way, it makes it more powerful. The connection is made greater. And it's like if just one person on the surface of this earth can hear them, can hear this connection, it opens it up to thousands in a way, in its own way. Why is this important? The city of Seraphim has been designed and has worked for eons and eons and eons and eons of time. I don't know how many eons, way back there, to facilitate the divine centric motion of the planet, to keep it in alignment, to keep Gaia's flame burning in its fullest form. Because there's all kinds of reasons why Gaia got sidestepped with all of these things that are going on not just what humanity's doing, but there's so much here. I'm going to start getting off on other things, but the reason we're so wacky on the surface of the earth is not like we're all bad souls, and some of us are badder than others. It's not that. The planet's geocentric motion has been sidetracked. It's gotten out of sync. And there's a whole story about that I'm not going to go into here, but it has been gotten out of sync. It's very difficult to live on a planet that's out of sync with its divine centrific motion. I'm going to call it that. I can't think of another term right now. So souls that are trying to figure things out really get stuck in the muck, because it's like having your back out of whack. And your brain doesn't think right when your back is all misaligned, because it's triggering synapses in the brain that are not correct. Maybe you have a foggy mind, or maybe you know, I don't know, maybe some of the really people that are really mentally ill, that's obviously they're having problems in their whole body. So the body of the planet is out of whack. Gaia is her pure soul self. Nothing can touch that. But her body has been misaligned. So Seraphim is at least one of the true actions of the planet to help adjust, to keep that signal. They can't adjust it really, but to keep the signal strong. And in a way it does adjust. It adjusts in minor ways, but it's keeping the signal strong. All of the inner earth, all of the beings of the inner earth are beautiful. Some of them are more aware than others. It's a whole vast topic. I'm not going to get into in this, but Seraphim is the cream. Seraphim is the point where souls come together to act as a divine vehicle to keep the planet in alignment. They are in the interior of this sacred world. They are right there, sitting on the cusp of the central sun atoma, the heart of Gaia, the golden rose. And within that golden rose lies the planetary genius, the director of spiritual sovereignty, of all the divine souls of the planet. And all souls are divine. So when we take an action that directly links with these souls in Seraphim, in the labyrinth, the whole labyrinth process, if we can find a way to interface with that, we obviously can't have our own giant labyrinth with all these fancy inner labyrinths and all of these things. I can't even recreate that in second law. I have recreated, however, an interface. It's a very simple but dynamic interface, and it was guided by Thoth to be created. And I'm going to be showing you in the second part of this intro, it's intro part 1 and intro part 2, how this operates. I'm not going to be giving an activation in this. I'm just going to show you how it operates and how it works and how it interfaces. That's my plan for the introduction, part 1 and part 2. Then, on a regular basis, and I can't say how often, I'm going to be putting out really short, like 5, 6, 7-minute videos with my avatar in the labyrinth, possibly Thoth's avatar in the labyrinth at times, the one that I created in the virtual. And we're going to go through a very simple process, and each time it's going to be a little different. What this is going to do is just trigger for you so that you can, on a daily basis, or however often you feel guided, to do your own process. But it is giving you a focal point, an energetic focal point. So let me explain now a little bit more about when a person, an inner earth person, a dweller of Seraphim, that's given the task of walking the labyrinth, comes up to the gate on either side, whether it's on side A or side B, what they're going to see. Before they enter, where they can select which passage they go through, and I don't know, well, we're going to get to how that's selected. They're met at a threshold that, one big threshold that they have to go to first. It's large, and then they go into whichever path they're going to take for that day. In that threshold, there is a statue of what I would call a griffin. It's a very large statue of a griffin. It's the guardian of the gate. I'm sorry, my kitty is acting up here. On one side, I see it like on the left side. On the right side, there is a a large, or there may be several, I'm not sure if there's just one or there's several fountains. Fountains, by that I mean there's water pooled up in it. It's like a bowl, like a big bowl, and there's water in there. They wash their hands and their face, or they just put water. It's sacred water. I haven't gotten exactly how sacred or where it comes from, but it's called sacred water. Like, I don't know, when you go to the church or something. And then the water is constantly flowing into this bowl. It's obviously flowing out somewhere. And there's a little cup or whatever, and you drink from the water. You're going, ooh, all those people drinking from the same cup. This is the interesting thing about the inner earth. There are no destructive microbes. There are no microbes there are no germs. I can't say there are no microbes, but the microbes act differently. So you don't get diseases, you don't get flu, you don't get people's diseases or anything like that by drinking water by drinking from a cup that 50 other people had drunk from. So there's no problem there. But anyway, I don't know exactly how it works, but I don't want to get too much detail here. But you got to, wash your hands, wash your face, drink a little water. And then you ask of the guardian to give you the signal for the day. It's like, I'm getting the word signal, but it's like a thought, a pattern to hold. And everyone that walks through, I'm going to take a pause a moment because I want to be correct on this. I'll be right back to you here. Everyone is given basically the same signal. There might be a variation slightly for the individual, but it has the same core signal. It's a thought, it's a message. Kind of like if you draw a tarot card, but it's a little more deep than that. But, I'm trying to give you an essence of it. So they have that signal, and they know the chant they're going to do beforehand. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but they know it's not some complicated thing. It's more of an oming kind of thing, but there's a little more to it than that. And they're all doing the same one. And and I believe the chant may change at times, but it doesn't change every time they walk it. So they chant that as they walk the path. Now, asking the guardian for the signal, they're also receiving a protective or an entity that moves with them. And this entity is individual for them. So to some people, it's always an animal. It's a shamanic thing, kind of, it might be an owl, a deer, a bunny rabbit, I don't know, whatever comes to the individual. And so they have their shamanic presence that's with them, and they have the chant, and they have the signal, which is, a highlight, a keynote, I guess that's what we'd say, but I'm receiving that they call it a signal. So that's what I believe I need to tell you in part 1 here. Part 2 of the intro, we're going to go into Second Life, into the virtual, and I'm going to show you with those guidance what I've created, and we're going to talk about it. I'm just going to give you a walkthrough so you understand the symbology, and I didn't just throw a bunch of pretty things together. It's got a reason why everything is positioned as it is. You don't have to memorize this or anything, but I just want to inform you. So your subconscious will be on board with all of this as you work with it. So I believe that's all I have to say in part 1 of the intro. So I'm going to proceed to part 2.